a flashback, the 1977, that was also the period in which the politics of India was changing, and we were really out of the very major constraints of shortages to some extent, and there was a learning curve beginning to happen about more industrialization, new energy in the country coming back. At that point in time, I joined the Karnataka State Handloom Development Corporation, and that is when I discovered that there was about 150,000 Janata sarees in stock, which was not being sold off. So the then managing director wanted me to make a strategy, and that is how probably the Janata saree scheme, in a way, it had two issues. One was that it was to help the handloom weavers to have regular employment, to give a subsidy per square meter of cloth, which was Janata. It was called Janata subsidy, and thereafter get that saris or dhotis or lungis marketed through the Kerala state handlooms or Karnataka state handlooms or Tamil Nadu state handlooms and various apex cooperatives and corporations in the country. However, it had a damaging impact on the weaving traditions of the country, because most of the good weavers started finding the easy the road of least resistance, so to say, and started weaving the very simple 40s saris and lungis. It had its own impact in terms of reducing the capabilities of the weavers. The story goes from there that the Janata saris which were lying in stock had to be sold, and I had to really go to the interior places like Shimoga and Bellary, Bidar, Basav all kinds of places in Karnataka, and meet the primary cooperative societies as well as the consumer cooperatives as well as the public distribution outlets, and start to talk to them to also stock Janata saris at that point in time. And then the rest is a big cascading impact of people placing orders for Janata saris and the entire stock getting sold in about a year's time. I still have the have the letter from the managing director appreciating that particular disposal of stocks. But what it taught me was that the basic roti, kapda, makan issues of our country sort of plagued at that point in time, and very basic clothing requirements of people to some extent was solved by the Janata Sari scheme. On the downside, where it had an impact on the weaving traditions of India. But that was also the time when we introduced branding in Indian silks. The Priyadarshini, for example, came at that point in time, and we had the first fashion show, I would presume, in the country of silk saris called Trend 79, staged in a club in Bangalore, where we had shown the beautiful silk saris, and at the end of the show, while the people are watching the show, they had a matching profile of the model with the sari, and they could tick the number of the sari which is shown at the back of the model, and then put it into a box, and the saris got distributed or delivered at their home. So these kind of things, and also some of the garments made. There was a very enterprising Mrs. George, who was running the small garment unit in the Karnataka Handloom Development Corporation. I would say that my first brush with fashion was through that highly suave and very well turned out lady officer who held the charge of that particular unit. And I remember she asking me to make a business plan for that, how to promote those garments. And we had in the Handloom Spring Bazaar in 1977, which also staged the largest agricultural, agriculture show in the country. The Agri Show also started in 1977. So the Handloom Spring Bazaar was an annexure to that show, and we had for the first time showcased handloom silk garments as well as the beautiful Priyadarshini saris in that exhibition. And I remember the Handloom Commissioner's office, which had such stalwarts like Mani Narayan Swami and Renika Sinha and Sheshadriji. All these people were very passionate about handlooms, and we had very, very important dignitaries from the central government coming for the fashion show which was staged in Pragati Maidan. And that was the kind of immersion to show that what potential Indian textiles and handlooms had in the fashion world. It is also very interesting that similar exercise was done later in 1983 in Kerala when we started the Handex International with 150 sewing machines, and we started the first air-conditioned showroom for handloom garments on the railway station road in Trivandrum. And that store was probably the harbinger of possible ready-to-wear revolution which would have taken place in the handloom industry. So there was a lot of experiments going on in the country from in that period which I can recall to project to the next level of ready-to-wear and fashion. But the word fashion, as I said, started only with the setting up of National Institute of Fashion Technology, which came almost 40 years after independence. But if you really look at the design, was very much on the mind of the political leadership and the initial post-independent group of ministers and the Honorable Prime Minister at that point in time, who thought of setting up the modern temples of democracy, as it was called, the institutions. Whether it is a mountaineering institute or the IIM, Indian Institute of Management, or the Indian Institute of Technology, or the National Institute of Design, all came in the period between 1955 to 1962. And NID was born in 1961. It completed 50 years in 2011. So if you look at the first textile department, which was a result of the Fab India's, at that point in time, John Bissell, who came into India, and he started exporting Indian handloom garments, as you would probably read in the Fab India story, to USA. And through that, his experiments with the Indian handlooms in the fashion world in USA, some of the best fashion designers, whether it is Ferragamo or all kinds of fashion designers of that time, had used Indian handlooms. And that story is well told in the Fab India story. But John Bissell was also asked by the UNDP to look at what kind of a textile course need to be introduced in India, and what kind of a textile tradition in terms of curriculum need to be built in. So there was in the National Institute of Design, the UNDP's, with the UNDP's assistance, John Bissell doing some research and suggesting the equipment required, etc., which made history, because that was how the textile department was set up, and the evolution of textile to later, much later in 1992, the apparel department, which came in a more full-fledged manner. The activities, if you look at, the institutes had a role to play in introducing design into the country, and for fashion word to be also introduced to the country. And that is how the evolution of the story linked to the Indian textile heritage, the evolution of the design because of the poor standards of Indian small-scale manufacturing which existed post-independence, and how to correct that for an Indian design idiom. And thereafter, several decades later, when the liberalization was still far away in 91, how the government thought about a new twist while thinking about a modern contemporary twist to the education by bringing in National Institute of Fashion Technology.